You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about sports in the state of Michigan?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media, the show that provides research and statistics about all the Detroit and Michigan sports teams, whether fans like it or not, and detects, exposes, and reveals actual and hidden facts and truth that the mainstream media doesn't want you to know. No junk, no entertainment, no homerism, no slappiness, no coddling, no pop culture, no conspiracy theories, no opinions, no shilling, and no fluff. Head over to our website, the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast.com. Follow us on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Michigan_Truth. And like and share our verified Facebook page, the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. Also listen to us on Spreaker, CastBox, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts via iTunes, and Spotify. And like Stables Media on Facebook. The Michigan Sports Truth Podcast does not represent or defame any of the teams it covers, nor does it represent or compete against any mainstream media in the state of Michigan. It is also not for entertainment or debating purposes. It only detects, exposes, and reveals honest, actual, and hidden truth, facts, and statistics about them. And it is for every sports fan's own good because the truth is out there. And welcome to another edition of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast, Primetime Edition on Stables Media. I'm Taylor Phillips along with Ed Smith and Frank Vasner. Ed, how was your week and how are you doing tonight?
Doing quite well, Taylor. I mean, with the NFL being back, things are slowly returning to its regular rotational pull on the schedule, so I'm pretty good to go here tonight.
All right. Frank, how about you?
Well, as I told you guys before we came on the air, it's kind of been a mix of things. It's been insanely busy between my day job at Amazon, having to work overtime last week, and also on the football side of things, with high school football being back this week in Michigan. I've been having to post a lot of content on the website I write for, and I'll also be, as I said to you guys, I'll be making my officiating debut at the varsity level this Friday night for Britt Deerfield at Morenci. It's something I'm excited and nervous about at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Good on you, Frank.
Yep, me too. I'm going to be back on the WMLM airwaves.
Nice.
Yep. So we got Tigers and Lions to recap and preview in the week ahead, and of course our TMSTP Stories Vault segment, which is based on a classic DSR article on former Tigers TV commentators Mario Impemba and Rod Allen. We're going to follow up on them next week too. Plus an article from the LA Times about Pistons owner Tom Gores. But first, Tigers are slipping. They lost 12-2 and won 6-3 in the doubleheader last Thursday in St. Louis. Jordan Zimmerman didn't do too bad. Only 3 innings pitched. He's throwing limited innings just like Michael Fulmer was. Only 1 earned run. But then the Tigers got swept by the White Sox 4-3, 14-0, and 5-2. Casey Mize on Friday night in the series opener in Chicago had a no-hitter through 5 innings, and then a leadoff walk and a double, and then a run in the 6th inning before Jose Cisnero gave up a 3-run home run to lose the game in the 6th inning. And then Saturday, Michael Fulmer, 5 runs on 9 hits allowed. The bullpen never showed up. Spencer Turnbull in the 5-2 loss in the series finale, 5 runs allowed in 5 innings. That, too, is unacceptable. Then the Tigers had Monday off, and then yesterday they won 6-0 last night at Comerica Park City Royals. Matt Boyd pitching some shutout baseball, 5 2/3 innings, 2 hits, 4 walks, no runs whatsoever, 5 strikeouts. His ERA is slightly lower to 6.75 thus far this season. That was the first shutout for the Tigers this season. And then just recently, they lost 4-0 to those Royals. Tarek Skubal, not too bad, except those 3 earned runs on 4 hits, all of them given up to catcher Salvador Perez, a 2-run homer and then an RBI double. But 6 innings pitched other than that. No walks, 8 strikeouts. He's become the second Tiger ever to post 8+ strikeouts and 0 walks, according to Baseball Reference. Schoolboy Rowe was the first on April 21st of 1933. That was a long time ago. Tigers lost Jonathan Scope, putting him on the 10-day DL with a right wrist sprain. Nico Goodrum reinstated from the alternative training site. Grayson Greiner optioned to the alternative training site. Thank God. Eric Haase called up. Got the Indians coming up, but maybe too little too late, because when we're going to turn it over to Ed first and then Frank Vasner to follow up, the Tigers are slipping like we anticipated them to. They're not quite officially eliminated, but they're likely eliminated. It's just too bad they couldn't tank it all. Ed, take the floor.
It's not necessarily too bad when you consider the pieces that are currently in place with the roster, whether in regards to certain spots in the lineup, particularly at first base, or how certain pitchers within the rotation may perform on any given day. You just really don't know. Jordan Zimmerman, I think, doesn't really surprise me so much. He is the older veteran compared to Michael Fulmer, so even with his limited amount of work, he knew exactly what he needed to do just to get over, and he did what he had to do. Michael Fulmer, I've mentioned this to you in public, Taylor, I believe he may be cooked. I think in regards to his with him being brought back as early as he was, his elbow never really got the chance to fully recover as it should have been. Yes, coming off Tommy John surgery, but you know how things typically go with your career after that. I wouldn't be surprised if he develops shoulder problems in the near future in regards to his elbow, because there's a saying, I happened to look up, and it goes like first it's the elbow, then it's the shoulder. So really worried about Michael Fulmer. I hope I'm proven wrong in this case, but I just don't know. I think we may be watching something unravel before our very eyes. We just don't want to admit it yet. As for the rest of the team, like you said, it may be, in fact, too little too late, because despite everything that happened within this past week, they are now still set close to the basement than they are to the ceiling in regards to the AL Central Division. They're only one game separated between them and Kansas City for last place. That's it. Or one or two losses
in the division.
One or two games in the loss column. That's all that separates them from last place. They're much further to last place than they are to first place, even so much to second or third in regards to Minnesota or Cleveland. So it doesn't surprise me when you have a team that doesn't have the consistent production offense, and knowing what they lack in terms of certain spots in rotation, both starters and relievers. And the fact that the whole front office is not really somebody that's trustworthy at this point. No, it's not a surprise that what this team has been able to accomplish. I think it was a surprise that they were overachieving as much as they did at the start of the season before things finally came back to earth.
Yeah, definitely. And we expected them to come back to earth, didn't we? Frank, any follow-up? What do you know about all this the past week?
Well, I'll kind of echo what Ed said. It's pretty much what's been expected. I mean, yeah, you've seen some good performances, like Jordan Zimmerman, his return to the lineup. He didn't do too terrible, which, I mean, you can take that as positive. But, I mean, everything else, Michael Fulmer, apparently still pitches terrible and all in all. But this whole season has just kind of been what we would expect. I mean, the overachieving in the first part, I think, there's been some individual performances here and there that probably were a little bit of an eyebrow raiser here and there, but in the end, we're seeing the Tigers just as a team just start to peter out as the end of the season draws near. I mean, as Ed said, they're only one game ahead of the Royals for last in the division, and so, I mean, well, I think what we can be grateful for is that it wasn't a complete disaster of the season. You saw them compete a little bit, but they just didn't have the horses. And, of course, that's kind of the deal with the way their front office and their philosophies are. That was not to be a surprise in any way, shape, or form, and that's probably going to continue to be that way until there's some serious changes made at the top.
Yeah, and considering manager Ron Gardenhire finishing out the final year of his contract, the question is, are the Tigers going to extend him or fire him or let him retire? I mean, they have made some progress from the last 2 years, which have been downright terrible. This season's below average, more like mediocre, which is, you can tell, it's an improvement, but still not good enough to make the playoffs. We'll turn it over to Ed, and then we'll turn it over to Frank. Ed, what are your thoughts what Alavila might do?
I think there's really nothing much for him to do. Like, what are we going to do? Enter another Operation Rebuild for, the fourth time in the past 6 years? Like, come on, stop. Recognize that what Alavila has done has been basically short of an unmitigated disaster when you consider the fact that, he was in charge. He was given the leeway by Chris Ilitch to do what he was supposed to do, and that alone should have been the first red flag. And knowing what he's been able to do so far and I just don't think it's going to be. I don't feel optimistic enough that he's going to make a 180 in reverse course of what he's done so far. So in terms of what he's been put together so far, it's an indicative, on what he is overall as a GM in terms of putting together a team, how to structure a team. It speaks for itself. You are what your record says you are, and it's a definite reflection on not just yourself, but also who around you puts that team together. So that's a definite reflection on Gardenhire, Avila, and the whole front office.
Yep, and like you mentioned last week, the Tigers are what their record says they are. Frank, what does your survey say?
I mean, truthfully, I don't think it's going to make too much of a difference if Gardenhire is brought back or not. If you bring him back, I mean, yeah, you might make strides here and there, but I don't think you're going to be any closer to being a contending team. But if you fire him, it's basically starting over from square one again. And truthfully, I don't think that you can really make the progress you need to make until a change is made at the top. And that begins and ends with Al Avila. Because when he was brought in as the general manager and basically given carte blanche by Chris Ilitch to do whatever, that was, like Ed said, that was a huge red flag. And so far, he has not shown that he is a capable major league general manager at all. He hasn't shown it through trades or signings. In fact, the on-field product has just been downright awful. So I don't think you're going to see it's going to make much difference until Avila is out of the picture, which I don't see happening anytime soon, given the nature of Chris Ilitch being a cheapskate.
Yeah, and I agree with the both of you. If you fire Ron Gardenhire, it's probably going to be just the start of another rebuild, which puts the Tigers back to the bottom of the card deck. But if you keep Gardenhire, you just keep the Tigers at least mediocre if they can't improve any better than what they are right now this year. So
but
there's that.
That still leaves you in limbo. And if you're not terrible enough to where you can get a high draft pick, then what's the point? What's the point of doing all this taking?
Yeah, unless you can hire a better manager that's actually more experienced and smarter and has a sense of urgency. Like, let's say, Gabe Kapler or something like that, or Manny Acta. Those are 2 of 4 managers that Jeff Moss of the Detroit Sports Rag wanted a few years ago. Think about that, guys.
Yeah,
remember?
The thing is that requires a competent and smart front office and trust and ownership. We have neither of that right now.
No, because Chris Ilitch is probably pulling Al Avila's strings, and he has been for quite a few years by signing him to a multi-year extension without any further detail. Just a multi-year extension, no exact number on the years or the money. Still haven't even heard a word of those details since last year when that actually happened, which makes this whole thing so baffling. So anyway, Tigers finish their season, a 4-game series at home against Cleveland. That starts tomorrow through Sunday, then another Monday off, and then they go to Target Field for a short 2-game series of the Minnesota Twins next Tuesday and Wednesday. Both games start at 7:40, and then at the Kansas City Royals at Kauffman Stadium to wrap up their season, a 4-game set. So let's talk some Lions here. Lions went out to a 23-6 lead, and then they absolutely blew it in the end and lost 27-23. The Jamie Collins Sr. ejection, well, I mean, that was probably might have looked like it was accidental, but still, if you get too close to a referee, you might bump into him with your helmet, and that got him an ejection from the game, and that's what happened there. As for the rest of this, Desmond Trufant looked undisciplined when he took 2 penalties in 1 play in that game. DeAndre Swift, his first NFL touchdown on a 1-yard run to end the first half, and at the end of the game, he dropped the pass in the second-to-last play of the game. He dropped the pass for what could have been a game-winning touchdown. Adrian Peterson, on the bright side, was on fire, like 13 or 19 carries for 93 yards. The secondary passing defense, as usual, or as always, I may add, was the real scapegoat because they didn't step up much or at all when they kept leaving opposing receivers wide open and thus allowing too many complete passes thrown by Mitch Trubisky, who was highlighted as the Bears' starting quarterback. There's been news swirling around that Mitch Trubisky was going to be the starting quarterback of the Chicago Bears over Nick Foles when, of course, there was still that debate. The Lions' secondary defense gave him not one, not two, but 3 free passes, one of them which turned out to be the game winner. The secondary defense was atrocious. Jeff Okudah was injured, mind you. He still had that hamstring injury, and he could not play. And we'll get to Okudah in about a minute or two. The defensive front did its thing for some portions of the game, especially midway through the fourth quarter. Matt Prater 3 for 4, including a missed field goal that gave the Bears excellent field position to set up a quick touchdown drive to make it a game again, when the Lions could have elected to punt the ball to pin the Bears a lot deeper into their own territory. Thank you very much, Matt Patricia and Darrell Bevel, you dumbasses. And then Matthew Stafford threw a self-destructive interception with over 2 minutes to go, giving the Bears a chance to take the lead late, which they did on an Anthony Miller touchdown reception from Trubisky with under 2 minutes to go. And then the ensuing drive by Stafford, which I mentioned before, which failed due to Swift's aforementioned drop pass. My truth is, the whole Austin game should not all be solely pinned on DeAndre Swift just because he dropped what could have been a game-winning touchdown pass with just seconds to go. There are other players on the Lions team that also need to be held more accountable on their own. The secondary defense, like I mentioned before, almost never showed up, while Okudah's elite talent was missing, like I mentioned before, due to his hamstring injury. Stafford was decent until a suicidal pick before the final 2-minute warning, and the coaches were being incompetent, as they usually are. We're going to turn over to Ed and then Frank. Ed, just another Lions game right there. So
yeah, it's a motto: New Year, same old Lions. I even posted that on Twitter after the game because my reaction was not that surprising. Like, come on, we literally saw this exact scenario play out last year, 1 year ago, against the Cardinals. The only difference is we actually lost the game this time. There was no time to bail us out from a humiliating Week 1 loss because this was the same script. You jump out ahead, you think you look fine, but you notice the same similar problems that still rear its ugly head. Settling more for field goals than finishing off drives for more touchdowns. Like, how in the world did Stafford only end up with 1 touchdown pass in the whole entire day? Credit that he got it to Hawkinson, which is nice because with Kenny Golladay being out, it required more weapons for Stafford to get more of the rest of the offense involved. And between Amendola, Hawkinson, Marvin Jones, and of course, knowing that you can have either an Adrian Peterson or a Kerryon Johnson, and like we saw with DeAndre Swift, any of those running backs available, there was still plenty of way to share the wealth on the offensive end. And we saw it work to a certain level. I mean, for goodness sake, we saw it was evident in the lead that they built up. But like I said, when you're still settling for field goals and not getting enough touchdowns, it's going to come back and bite you. And we saw what happened, especially when Prater ended up missing one of those field goals. I think Patricia was far too confident in Prater's leg and his kicking ability. Yeah, it helped us out so far. And it just, no, that was just not the right thing to do. Sometimes you got to consider the fact that, hey, yeah, it's good that, your kicker's been doing well so far, but it's getting to a point in the game where every inch of field counts, and how he didn't have the president in mind to consider playing the field position game, which was, even if Chicago did score, it was going to chew up more and more clock to the point where, hey, if you have less clock on you, you can try to implement a better 4-minute drive with Adrian Peterson, with Kerryon Johnson, and even DeAndre Swift, your 3 running backs that I mentioned before, instead of that second to last drive, wherever the hell that was, that led to the Stafford interception. Now, you mentioned DeAndre Swift, all the blame should not be on him. Absolutely, it should not be. Yes, he dropped the touchdown pass. Yes, it's a snapshot that's going to go down in an endless collage of moments of pain for Lions fans. Yes, we get that. But it's not his fault. It was just a microcosm of how that whole day was. Had it, lost it. And between Stafford throwing the interception, the defense giving up the unanswered points that they did in the second half, and obviously the lack of adjustments made by Matt Patricia, this was an all-around team loss that solely cannot be pinned on the drop of DeAndre Swift. Yes, it hit him in the hands. Yes, he should have caught it. But I'm not going to jump down on a rookie. Mind you, listen, this is his literal first career game. He didn't even remember, there was no even a preseason being done. So for some of these young cats, this was some of their first ever taste of NFL action. And, DeAndre Swift, he got his experience firsthand. Now, hopefully, he can use that moment to help him get better and help make improvements because the talent and the potential is there with the young man. But, it was just unfortunately a painful learning lesson that you have to go through, whether it be in sports or in general. But, especially if you're an athlete in the NFL. So between that and the Bears' defense, especially late in the game, getting way better, doing a way better job of getting pressure on Matthew Stafford than vice versa with the Lions' defense, all those contributing factors led to what you saw there, which was, listen, the Bears, Mitchell Trubisky is not a world beater, okay? There's a reason why his selection will forever loom in the shadows of Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. But for this game, you got to give credit where credit is due. When you have your offensive line giving you the protection that you need, when you have a coaching staff that is competent enough to know what the hell they're doing, it doesn't surprise me that the Bears performed the way they did in the second half, and the Lions just didn't. So, again, new year, same old Lions.
Yep. Hashtag one playoff win in 63 years.
And
as
counting.
Scott Moss would put it. Yeah, and still counting. Yeah, definitely. That's exactly what I would say. Frank, what does your analogy say on this awful game?
Well, good thing that I had to work on Sunday and didn't witness the debacle. But again, there are no excuses for being up 23-6 in the second half and losing the game the way they did. I mean, look, you point to DeAndre Swift dropping a touchdown pass. I'm not going to pin the whole loss on him. Kind of like Ed said, had no preseason games to get acclimated and all that stuff. I mean, should he have made the catch? Yeah, but that shouldn't be the defining moment of his entire career. What I will do is say that it is the same old stuff that happens with this coaching staff. Matt Patricia fails to make adjustments, and this is the same coach who has won exactly 9 games heading into it now in his 3rd season as head coach, when the GM, Bob Quinn, publicly stated that winning 9 games in a season wasn't good enough. Anyone remember that? And that's why he fired Jim Caldwell, and he brings in his buddy, Patricia. Now, I know there are a lot of people saying that Patricia will get fired. I don't buy that at all. Not when Bob Quinn is calling the shots, and it seems like the Ford family doesn't even care as to how well their team will do. So it's another year of SOL and 1 playoff win in what will now be 64 years.
Yep, likely be 64 years. We'll still see what happens the rest of the season, but it's likely going to be 1 playoff win in 64 years and still counting, likely still counting. So anyway, speaking of Jeff Okudah, he did full practice today. Whoop-de-doo. So Jeff Okudah is actually getting healthier, so we might actually see him play and make his NFL debut in Green Bay when the Lions take on the Packers this Sunday at 1 on Fox. However, they did lose cornerback Justin Coleman, who suffered a hamstring injury in Week 1. He's placed on the IR. He'll be out at least 3 weeks. But even he didn't do too much. Justin Coleman did. There was nobody in the secondary defense that even stepped up in the entire game, as far as I can see in that game.
And since you mentioned Okudah was able to be in full practice today, the name that was not on that list was Des Trufant. And Kenny Galladay, again, still unavailable due to his hamstring issue. So it may be, unless things improve drastically, it may be another week without Kenny Galladay, which, again, I don't think should be the maker or breaker in terms of our offense. I've mentioned to you the names. We know the weapons that's available. It's called, this team has got to learn how to finish drives and score some damn touchdowns. So that's, Kenny Galladay missing time and missing work is not, the ebb and flow or, the difference maker in terms of, our offense is just this close. No, our offense is fine. We just got to finish some damn drives, and our defense needs to stop blowing leads. And I don't know how that's going to be possible, especially going against Aaron Rodgers, who just dropped 43 points on a Viking squad who has a much better defense than ours. So you're going into this game potentially without Des Trufant and without Justin Coleman. And Jeff Okuda, hi, hey rookie, welcome to the NFL. Just in time for your debut against Aaron friggin' Rodgers and Devontae Adams. Let's see what that money's worth, kid.
Yeah. So, also not practicing, defensive end Austin Bryant, cornerback Darryl Roberts, and offensive tackle Halapoulivaati Vaitai. One Lions player was limited practice, and that's defensive lineman Nick Williams with a shoulder injury. So it's 50-50 on Nick Williams there. The Lions also, according to NFL.com, signed cornerback Chris Jones from the Arizona Cardinals practice squad. So the Lions added an extra cornerback just to join what could be Jeff Okuda's NFL debut in Green Bay, which leads us to the Lions at the Packers. Let's preview this baby, huh? Aaron Rodgers is still going to slice and dice most of the secondary, but it'll be interesting to see Jeff Okuda making his NFL debut against Aaron Rodgers, who one of the greats right now under center. We'll turn it over to Ed, and then we'll turn it over to Frank. Ed, what is your preview of the Lions and Packers? Go right ahead.
My preview is to piggyback off what you said. Aaron Rodgers is still, in the words of Stephen A. Smith, he is a bad man. He's coming off of a 4-touchdown, 364-yard performance against, again, a Vikings team who has a much better defense, I feel, than the Lions could ever dream of in terms of what they put together. And knowing that he's going to be facing a secondary, potentially with no Justin Coleman and no Des Trufant, and Jeff Okuda, a rookie, Jeff Okuda, as talented as he is, he's still a rookie making his debut. I wonder how Rodgers is going to go after him, knowing the big week that Devontae Adams had for 14 receptions, 150-plus yards, and 2 touchdowns. I wonder how he's going to go after that, how attack that matchup. I mean, that may be the only one that he's able to do because Equanimeous St. Brown, the other wideout for Green Bay, he's unavailable. So there's that regard. And I think with this being in Green Bay, granted, there may be little to no fans at all, but still, the visual difference, an atmosphere of being home versus away should still count to something, I feel, especially if you're a young cat like DeAndre Swift or Jeff Okuda. That being said, atmosphere, virtual fans, that's not going to be the difference is whether or not who wins and who loses. It comes down to matchups, it comes down to players, and it comes down to who adjusts more. And I think between, obviously, Rodgers, knowing what he can do against our defense and secondary, knowing that, the Lions' offensive line still has some work to do in regards to doing a better job protecting Stafford and giving him more time to throw. I noticed, one of the best throws that he had late in the game was when he had time to actually read his damn options and not be rushing his decision-making. So, again, I brought up the key last week. I'll bring it up again. Give Stafford some protection. Give him time to make throws, and that's all you need. Adrian Peterson, I believe they're going to continue on, or at least should, if they're smart, continue to get him involved as much as they can, unless Green Bay finds a way to make an adjustment about that. Then that's when you give the ball to carry on to DeAndre. And for the offense, yeah, get Hawkinson involved more. You got him a touchdown last week? Good. He's your friggin' lotto pick, top 10 pick from a couple years ago anyway. Use him. Get him involved. And then in regards to that, there's so many things that what you could do. But again, I don't think it's going to matter because I think Green Bay, listen, we all thought coming into this season that Green Bay was the better team anyway. This division was theirs to lose. So that doesn't surprise me. So if the Lions go in there and they do a usual Lions thing where they look terrible one week and they come back the next week and beat a team they weren't supposed to beat under any circumstance, we've seen this song and dance before. So I'm not going to be falling for this okie doke even if the Lions somehow win. But I don't expect them to. I expect the Packers of Green Bay to get this win by at least 2 touchdowns. So I'm thinking a 35-17 kind of deal because the Lions, I don't see the Lions making enough adjustments to where they can finish more drives with touchdowns while keeping up with Green Bay at the same time. So I just don't see it. I think Rodgers is going to continue his hot streak. He's going to do well against his defense, and that's that. So my final score, 3 prediction is going to be Green Bay 35, Detroit 17.
Yeah, and Rodgers going to slice and dice the secondary defense like I mentioned before. I want to touch on DeAndre Swift, by the way, back on his drop pass. He's actually a running back. The Lions tried to use him as a wide receiver, which was a very dumb idea, by the way. Anyway,
well, I don't know it wasn't necessarily a dumb idea. I mean, they got the pass that they wanted. Like Stafford,
right.
Yeah, Swift was able to beat his man, and Stafford had him wide friggin' open. He just dropped the pass.
Yeah, he's got to learn to catch passes if you're a running back. Running backs have caught passes before, like Reggie Bush when he was playing for the Lions, by the way. So, yeah, there you go. So, Frank, what is your analysis on Lions-Packers, and what is your prediction?
I have a feeling that this one will get ugly quick. I mean, we saw what Aaron Rodgers did to the Minnesota Vikings, and really the only good that came from that is it helped me get a win in my fantasy football league, but that's another topic for another time. So I think, again, he will pretty much have his way with the Lions defense, and I will predict a 38-14 Packers win in this one. It's not even going to be close because Aaron Rodgers just has too much. You mentioned Devontae Adams, also has Aaron Jones, the running back, and even Marta has Valdez-Scantling, the other wide receiver, who has done pretty well for them as well. So I'll take Green Bay in a rout.
All right, I'm going to go with the Packers 42 and the Lions 13. 42-13 the Packers. Yeah, mine's going to be even worse than you guys predicted, but slightly. Not a whole lot worse, but slightly. So there you go. That's Lions-Packers. Now to our TMSTP story vault from Jeff Moss at the Detroit Sports Rag on August 1st, 2013. Mario Impemba and Rod Allen hate each other. Moss writes 260,640 minutes. 260,640 minutes. How do you measure a half year of shilling? In ICEAs, in Country Strongs? How about love? On January 31st, 2013, the Miami New Times broke the biogenesis story implicating Johnny Peralta as a client of disgraced chemist Tony Bosch. And it only took 181 days for the Tigers TV broadcast team of Stupor Mario Impemba and Bojangles Rod Allen to mention the possibility that the Tigers all-star shortstop might face a suspension from MLB. And the pair went down kicking and screaming. On Wednesday afternoon, during the Tigers-Nationals game, Impemba finally addressed the humongous elephant in the room. And no, Scott Anderson of 97.1 wasn't in the Comerica Park press box. During the late innings of the Tigers' 11-1 bombing of the Nats, the Tigers' play-by-play announcer for Fox Sports Detroit finally raised the possibility of a Peralta suspension. And you could tell that his broadcast partner wasn't thrilled with the comment. Rod Allen, went into some Mark Garagos-esque spin that any talk of a Johnny Peralta ban was just pure speculation. And may I add, he said it was not very professional on our part, quote unquote. I think he said the word speculate or speculation about 10 times in 15 seconds, which is pretty shocking because I didn't think Rod Allen knew what the word speculate meant. Figured he thought it was something you purchased at a Richard Golden-owned store. Because earlier in the game, Allen continued to play dumb, something that comes extremely natural to this dolt, about the potential of a Peralta banishment. Allen actually informed viewers of Fox Sports Detroit that the reason the Tigers acquired Iglesias is the team that didn't know about the health of Miguel Cabrera. Quote, Iglesias brings good infield depth since we don't really know if Miguel is going to be out a while, unquote. That's what Rod Allen said. Miguel Cabrera is day-to-day with a pesky injury. Does this disingenuous bum think we are imbeciles and would believe this absolute lie? Does Bojangles think that the only source of Tigers information is disseminated from this FSD broadcast? So when Impemba actually pontificated on the suspension, not only was Mario speculating on the unknown, he was calling bullcrap on the comment that Allen had made a few innings earlier, which brings me to the point of this short story. Mario Impemba and Rod Allen can't stand each other. They barely talk to each other when they are not on the air, like legitimate hatred. A couple of years ago, someone in the Detroit sports media advised me that these two had a worse relationship than Simon and Garfunkel and that I should needle them on Twitter about it. I am not one to name names, but the person's name who suggested I tweak the duo rhymes with Matt Derry, I may add. You'll never guess it, so stop trying. A follower of mine asked me just the other day why Mario Impemba, of all people, blocked me on Twitter. Well, the answer is that I kept messaging him about his chilly relationship with this moronic member of the 1984 Tigers, who had a whopping 27 at-bats this season. Just 27 at-bats? Oh my God, that's way short. How bad did this relationship get at one point? It became so ugly that Fox Sports Detroit executives had to call the pair into a meeting together and explain to them that they were on the verge of screwing up a really good thing. Like Tigers broadcasts on FSD are the highest rated program in Detroit on a nightly basis, and those two were about to blow that up over a personality conflict. How far did the executives go in trying to persuade Allen and Impemba into coexisting for the sake of their own careers? They brought in pictures of famous duos who hated each other's guts, like Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis and Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. And I have learned from management that a lot of the dislike comes from Impemba's disdain for the unprofessional behavior of Allen. Rumor has it, Adele from FSD higher-ups, that Impemba is a pro's pro who is very well respected at the station, while Allen, well, isn't. So on Friday night, when you are listening to Impemba and Allen act jovially towards each other during the Tigers-White Sox broadcast, just be aware that it is all a facade. Impemba probably wishes that Allen was still working as a minor league coach in the Marlins organization, and Allen most likely would be chasing Impemba around Comerica Park like a Japanese pitcher if the illiterate color commentator had his druthers. So we're going to turn over to Ed and Frank. Not only was Rod Allen shilling for the Johnny Peralta suspension, he was also dumb about Miguel Cabrera being day-to-day, which is a shorter duration than a while. Mario didn't really appreciate Rod's stupidity and shilling. By the way, I was at that game where I met the lovely Fox Sports Detroit girls, and this was the first DSR article I've ever read, which changed me from a fanboy to a realist, and it was one of the best feelings ever in my life. But all that being said, we are all aware of the chair fight in the booth in Chicago 2 years ago at Guaranteed Rate Field, which got them fired at the end of the season. Ed, we'll go with you first. By the way, Rod Allen, 27 at-bats, that makes him look more like a stooge. So, Ed, give us your best analogy on the first Mario Impemba Rod Allen hate each other article from Jeff Moss. Go right ahead.
Yeah, it's not surprising following up, knowing what I did between those two. Moss was, so to speak, in the know before we all knew what was going to happen. This public display of their fight was just a blow-up of something that we knew internally behind the scenes for quite a while. Knowing that these two, personality-wise, was not meshing up together at all, and knowing that the contempt that they had for each other on a professional standpoint, frankly, I'm surprised that they didn't come to blows sooner rather than the time that they did. So it was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, because both guys were gone after this. And we see the current system rotation that they have that was starting about before it seemingly led to the spot that they are right now, with the main duties being held by, I believe, Matt Shepard, and Kirk Gibson. So, it sucks that not only did they embarrass themselves, but they embarrassed the profession, because the Tigers are employing them. And you're making them look bad. You're making so many other people look bad with your foolish, stupid, and reckless actions. And frankly, they deserve to lose their jobs for how both of them behaved. So hopefully there should be a lesson for them both. And that's my thoughts on that situation, because it was, frankly, quite humorous in a way to see something come about between two grown men who essentially were acting like children.
Yeah. And by the way, Jack Morris is also a color commentator, so that makes 3 on the broadcast team. Matt Shepard, Kirk Gibson, and Jack Morris.
Frank, that might have been Morris. I remember hearing, so because I know Gibby is dealing with his Parkinson's, so correct. It may be Morris being the main play-by-play with not play-by, main color guy with Shepard. Yeah, definitely. Frank, your turn.
Well, I think this was just the tip of the iceberg when it came to Mario and Rod not liking each other. But as Moss mentioned in the article, Mario was pretty professional and took his job seriously, and Rod was, to put it politely, just a clown on the air. He was just there he just thought he was there to entertain, when really he's got to be more informative, and he was not that, and I think we kind of saw that come along when then Kirk Gibson and Jack Morris got their shots being the color commentator. And then finally everything all blew up a couple of years ago over the infamous chair incident, which I believe we are going to do next week for our Story Vault segment, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Because
Mario and Rod still hate each other. That's coming up next.
So, yeah. And then it finally just blew up, and, it was really more just Rod being his usual clown self that was what set it all off. And, I mean, look, Mario shouldn't have did what he did, but at the end of the day, he at least did land back on his feet. I believe he's got a gig with the Boston Red Sox right now. I think I remember saying this to you a couple of years ago. Mario's someone, he'll find something to do down the road. Rod, he can just go kick rocks.
Yep, both Mario and Rod can. By the way, Kirk Gibson, although he's coming off Parkinson's disease, I've been hearing them yell and scream a couple times, like a cheerleader on the microphone on the airwaves, which is still like a little one-sided and unprofessional, although that does tell a sign that Gibson is actually kind of healing from that Parkinson's disease, which is almost impossible. So there's that. That's our TMSTP Story Vault. Some headlines, by the way, before we get to the Tom Gores article. Big Ten football is going to resume October 23rd and 24th. No schedule posted yet. The title game is on December 19th. No bye weeks. I always loved a season with no bye weeks, whether it's college football or NFL, personally. So there's that. And then the college basketball season is still going to be on schedule for November 25th, I think. Practice is going to start in October, but the competition is going to follow up on November, like the 25th. And then some Michigan Wolverines football news. According to Angelique Shingelis at the Detroit News, quarterback Dylan McCaffrey opts out and is expected to transfer, which Ed Smith, as you pointed out off the air, leaves Joe Milton the starting quarterback, right?
I believe so, unless there's some last-minute switcheroo that I wasn't fully aware of, because, right, Shea Patterson's gone now. He had his graduation. I think it was, unless there was someone else I was missing, I believe it was the competition was going to be between McCaffrey and Milton. I think McCaffrey probably thought that Milton Harbaugh was leaning towards giving the nod to Milton or someone else anyway. And he wants his own spot opportunity for himself. So that's why he made the decision that he made. My reaction is best of luck to him, obviously. I think hopefully he gets what he's looking for in whatever school he decides to go to. I just hope he doesn't get as injured as often as he was during his time here in Michigan. So, because that was a detriment that worked against us, and against him. So I hope history does not repeat itself at whatever school he chooses. And my thoughts on this are, it's simple. I think Joe Milton may very well be your next starter. We were just going to get that realization much quicker than anticipated. But knowing what I know, I do think that unless something is completely out of line here, I think Joe Milton will be your starter when the Big Ten officially starts next month.
Definitely. So let's move on quickly to the Tom Gores article. According to the LA Times, headlining, could a billionaire lose his LACMA board seat over his prison phone investment? Uh-oh. Here we go. This is going to be a long one, so bear with me, guys. Listen very carefully, too. Activists have been pressuring Tom Gores ever since his private equity firm bought one of the nation's largest prison phone companies. They have lobbied legislators, tried to squelch investments in his company, and now with social justice in the fore, are bringing the fight to Los Angeles billionaires' social circles. leveraging demands for criminal justice reform that have erupted since the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis police custody. Two groups sent a letter last week to LACMA Director Michael Govan and the co-chairs of the museum's Board of Trustees demanding that Gores lose his seat on the museum board. The harshly worded two-page letter accuses Gores of profiting off the deliberate exploitation of black, brown, and economically distressed communities through his private equity firm's ownership of Securus Technologies, which Gores Platinum Equity acquired in 2017. The September 9th letter sent by Color of Change stated, quote, while people across the nation demand racial justice, Tom Gores continues to amass wealth and benefit a system that exploits black people and profits from our pain. Put simply, Tom Gores is a prison profiteer and has no place on the board of a prestigious public museum like the LACMA, unquote. By the way, the Color of Change is an Oakland-based civil rights group formed after Hurricane Katrina and Worthrises, a New York nonprofit seeking to, quote, dismantle the prison industrial complex, unquote. The campaign comes amid heightened focus on the NBA, where Gores owns the Detroit Pistons, and the finals are soon underway. Players have protested police shootings of black Americans and rallied around the resurgent Black Lives Matter movement, the name of which emblazoned in large letters on court this season. Gores declined to comment on the letter, which was sent after the firm and activists had been engaging on steps to lower call rates. Talks broke down in the spring after the reforms announced by Platinum Equity failed to satisfy activists, and a planned face-to-face meeting between Gores and letter co-signatory Bianca Tylek, founder of Worthrises, never materialized. A Platinum Equity spokesman said the company would continue its efforts. Mark Barnhill said in an email of Platinum Equity, quote, we're doing the hard work of effecting real reform. We understand that execution matters more than rhetoric, and we trust the work speaks for itself. They don't want to acknowledge or assist our reforms because that would rob them of an adversary they need to fuel their cause, unquote. Govan also declined comment. The museum issued a statement that the board received the letter and is working to come together to discuss it. Board co-chair Anthony Ressler, an LA billionaire who also is the majority owner of an NBA team, the Atlanta Hawks, declined additional comment. Co-chair Elaine Wynn, the largest shareholder in Wynn Resorts in Las Vegas, could not be reached for comment. Gores, who has an estimated net worth of $5.7 billion and became an LACMA trustee in 2006, is not the first business leader on an arts board targeted by activists over ties to the criminal justice system. Warren Kanders resigned last year as vice chair of the Whitney Museum in New York over his ownership of Safariland, a company that makes tear gas and other equipment used by law enforcement and the military. Activists also called for the resignation of BlackRock chief executive Larry Fink at the city's Museum of Modern Art board over the investments firm reported stakes in private prison operators, GEO Group, and Core Civic. While criminal justice reform advocates have long attacked operators of private prisons, which under a new law are being phased out in California, they've also begun targeting companies that offer communications, ankle bracelet tracking, and other services to inmates for fees that they consider exorbitant. Activists began focusing on Gores 3 years ago when his Beverly Hills private equity firm acquired Securus Technologies for $1.6 billion, calling on him in 2018 to make reforms and sell the telecom. They tried to persuade public pension funds to not invest in Platinum Equity's latest buyout fund. The campaign prompted the Pennsylvania State Employees Retirement System to opt out, but it did not prevent Platinum Equity from raising $10 billion last year, $2 billion over its target and its biggest fund yet. Prison telecoms charge a premium for calls which are monitored for security purposes. Activists have calculated that Securus Technologies charge the highest rates in the industry, with one 2018 survey finding 226 of the 250 most expensive jails in the nation had contracts with the company, with 3 in Arkansas charging $24.82 for a 15-minute call. Those costs are typically borne by inmates and their families, a population that is disproportionately poor and non-white. Platinum Equity specializes in turning around troubled companies, and earlier this year it announced that it had brought in new management and released its pledge reforms. They included a bigger commitment to providing education and reentry opportunities to inmates while working with corrections agencies to bring down fees and rates, including elimination of the highest legacy outlier rates. It also said it would build on a pledge it already made to offer contracts without so-called site commissions, added call charges that help fund jails and prisons. In 2018, Securus Technologies signed just such a contract with the Illinois Department of Corrections, which had been pressured by state activists over high rates and commissions. The new contract brought rates down to 1 cent per minute. Dave Abel, a former IBM executive and PwC partner brought in to run Securus Technologies and its parent company, told the Times, the LA Times, this week that the telecom has already renegotiated contracts with 58 agencies that had call rates that previously exceeded national averages, lowering them in some cases by 60% or more. He said efforts to lower rates had brought the average cost of a call to less than 15 cents a minute, while in June, more than half cost less than $1 and only 0.01%, a hundredth of a percent, cost more than $20. Ouch. He said data from last month showed that there were no calls handled by Securus Technologies that cost more than $15 for 15 minutes. Abel said, quote, "There's a lot that we have done, and I'm incredibly humbled by the amount that remains to be done," unquote. He also said the company's for-profit business model is what provides the capital for additional services such as educational opportunities, secure computer tablets, and licensed entertainment. Activists, however, are pushing for far more and faster cuts, especially in local jails where rates and commissions tend to be higher. Last year, they were successful in lobbying New York to become the first major city to offer free phone calls in jails after the corrections system negotiated a contract with Securus Technologies that got the city's cost down to 3 cents a minute. A willingness to sign such agency-paid contracts is one of the company's pledges. This year, San Francisco became the first county in the nation to offer free phone calls when it negotiated a contract with another telecom for a fixed rate per line. Activists had threatened to bring campaign against Gores to Detroit. Yeah, back to Tom Gores, gentlemen, where the private equity titan has a higher public profile as the Pistons owner. In the state where he was raised, Gores has cultivated an image of a progressive owner, supporting player activism and recently offering the team's training facility as a polling place amid the coronavirus outbreak. Though activists acknowledge that the company has brought down rates, Scott Roberts, Senior Director of Criminal Justice Campaigns at Color of Change, said that the steps taken have been superficial and that incarcerated individuals and their families who still pay too much to communicate. He said forcing Gores to unload the business should actually make it easier to pressure governments and corrections agencies to sharply lower rates, since Gores' involvement lends credibility to the business, even if Securus Technologies is acquired by someone who does not engage activists at all. He said, quote, "This is a guy who's a legitimate businessman, already had an ungodly amount of money, and made a real choice to get into this type of business. Not only that, he positions himself as a community leader in Detroit specifically, but also in LA, because he sits on the board of institutions like the Museum of Art," unquote. The campaign to force Gores off the LACMA board prompted artist and former LACMA research assistant Jessica Simmons to write and pass around her own open letter to the LA arts community calling for Gores' resignation from the board of trustees. She noted the museum had released its own statement in support of social justice following Floyd's death. Simmons said, quote, "Where there's a lot of money, a lot of times that money is dirty. I think there's a lot of ground support for something like this, but I also think that people here just had no idea," unquote. The letter was being presented Wednesday to the museum and had more than 100 signatures. That was just today, guys. That's the end of this article. Yes, I am done. So we're going to turn it over to Ed first, and then we're going to turn it over to Frank to wrap this up before the closing statement. Ed, this Tom Gores thing with the Black Lives Matter and the phone company stuff, pretty serious stuff. Tom Gores could be in a lot of trouble. Ed, what do you make of it?
He might very well be. It wouldn't be a surprise, but I remember earlier this year when the Robert Kraft story broke about him in massage parlors and whatnot. So I don't know. If you can keep your job after that, apparently you can keep your job for anything.
Yeah, definitely. Frank, what's your take on this?
Well, I mean, granted, it does not look good, being that Gores is owning a company that's charging an arm and a leg for phone calls to prisons, especially when the NBA is a really big proponent of social justice and all that good stuff. But I don't think it's going to make him have to give up ownership of the Pistons because, I mean, it does look bad. I fully acknowledge that. But it's also, I don't think this is anything along the lines of when Donald Sterling and had his stuff going on when he owned the LA Clippers. And it's also nowhere near as bad as the stuff Dan Snyder has done with the Washington football team.
Exactly. All right, so to our closing statement we go. Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll turn it over to Frank. Ed, what is your closing statement?
My closing statement would have to be, it seems very well that the reality, the realization that I've been trying to deny and ignore seems to be fully knocking on my door now. That is, really, Matt Patricia doesn't know what the hell he's doing. So I'm going to be spending this season preparing myself for the possibility that Matt Patricia may very well lose his job. And if things keep going the way they are, then frankly, he should. Because there's so many excuses that you can use or can no longer use to explain not just this past Sunday, but your whole entire tenure. 9 wins in your now 3rd season is something that no head coach should be at this point, unless you're freaking Hugh Jackson or someone else to that effect. So it is, quite frankly, gut check time for Matt Patricia. And to me, at this point, he should be coaching every single game from here on out that it may be his last, because at this point, it may very well be.
All right. Definitely. Frank, what is your closing statement?
Well, my closing statement kind of relates to the return of football, not just with high school, but also the Big Ten Conference returning to action as well. Both things returning are nothing short of a miracle. Because if you would have told me a few weeks back that we would have high school football in the great state of Michigan and Big Ten football this fall, I probably would have asked you what the winning numbers would be for the Powerball lottery, because I would not have bought it at all. But you know what? It's here. And I think we all need to not take for granted what the things that we can enjoy as football fans because of this whole pandemic that's been going on. And as I said, I'll be making my first ever varsity football game officiating this Friday night. And it's something I've waited for a long time. And who knows if I'll ever get to do something like this again. But it's something that you have to enjoy every minute of. Any game you're at, enjoy it. And if you're a player listening to this, you play every play like it's your last play. Because with the way things are this year, you don't know when that's going to come out. And also, I'd like to dedicate this closing statement to a good friend of mine who recently passed away, fellow sports official Ed Emons, who I worked baseball with a few times. He is gone, but never forgotten.
Sorry for your loss. My prayers and condolences go out to you and his family.
Absolutely, Frank. Same here.
Thank you, guys.
My closing statement, the Tigers are pretty much out of the postseason mix to us all. As for the Lions, Okuda's elite talent, Jeff Okuda's elite talent, cannot come soon enough. But other than them, the Lions are the Lions, especially with Matt Patricia as head coach. Like Ed pointed out, it's make or break. But I'm saying likely ahead of time, he gone. And then there's Tom Gores. He just might be in deep water with this whole thing that he's dealing with here, according to the LA Times. Thank you very much. That just popped up right prior to this episode. I had to work very hard on it. So, excellent job, guys. Way to hang in there, guys. So, we'll be back next week. For Ed Smith and Frank Vashner, this is Taylor Phillips signing off. Thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing the Michigan Sports Truth podcast on Staples Media. And remember, the truth is out there. TTFN, ta-ta for now. Bon appetit. Hit them with a hind. We rest our case. Stay safe.